So I came across this video by Alba Boxing, and it's an interesting one. I'll leave his video linked in the description box below in case you want to check it out. It's only 3 minutes long, but he's giving his opinion on a video by ES News, Ellie Sekbak, and it's an interview with Robert Garcia. Robert Garcia's describing his situation with Anthony Joshua, and he says about how Joshua made him aware that Joshua was going to continue to shop around for trainers in the US. And he makes some interesting points, I feel, because he categorically says that he doesn't really think it matters who is training AJ. He basically just encourages or believes that Joshua can only really take the next steps in his career and improve and get back to any decent form when he changes the environment he's training in, and also maybe changing his mindset and talking about believing in himself more. And now Alba Boxing's video is, I believe it's titled, quote, "I don't want to train today. Anthony Joshua's former trainer speaks out." And yeah, it seems to be that Robert Garcia is insinuating that Joshua is not only a bit on the mentally weak side, but also a bit lazy. However, Alba Boxing does make a good point in the fact that he talks about when you have Robert Garcia, a trainer who is, yes, a great trainer, world-class, probably Hall of Fame trainer, he has a lot of experience working with fighters from lower weight classes. And therefore, does he have the expectations in terms of output, work capacity, and energy? Does he have unrealistic expectations of a heavyweight fighter? Because let's not get twisted. There's a big difference between a 5'6", 5'7" lightweight and a 6'6", 240-pound heavyweight. You cannot expect the same things from those two fighters. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And Alba asked the question, is Robert Garcia having this perception of Joshua being lazy, when in reality it's not Joshua being lazy, it's just Robert Garcia having unrealistic expectations of what his heavyweight charge can do. But I do find it interesting because we don't really associate Joshua being lazy. He typically turns up in very good nick, at least aesthetically. I know he's had some suspect stamina over the years, but I think a lot of that comes from Joshua's physiology. I think he's very much geared towards being an explosive athlete, more of a sprinter than a marathon runner. But also how appropriate his training is in terms of Joshua putting on a lot of muscle mass. When I look at Joshua, I see someone who's got a bit more of a naturally slim build. And so when you're seeing him with these massive bulging muscles and veins coming out of, his ears, not actually, just figure of speech, you do kind of wonder, okay, is this really a physique that's optimized for boxing? But that's old news. But I do think Alba makes a good point. But regarding the other things that Robert Garcia says, because you can watch the interview itself is about 10 minutes long, and he says some very interesting things, some very insightful things. Just to look back, he talks about it doesn't really matter who is training AJ. Robert Garcia actually goes as far as saying Joshua and Angel Fernandez, the current setup they have now, would be enough. I'm not sure I'd agree, and I'm sure many other people would probably scratch their head at that and think, I'm not sure about that. But he says that it depends on how much AJ wants it. So obviously alluding to the mental aspect. And it does seem that Joshua has been consumed by doubt, and has been for a long time now. Probably, I know there's a lot of argue and a lot of debate about when did Joshua start to go downhill mentally. I think it was really the Ruiz first fight. Some people have said no, it's probably the Klitschko fight. I'm not sure. I mean, we'll never really know unless Joshua releases an autobiography or something like that. But people say that, okay, Joshua was dropped by Klitschko. That probably showed him that he was vulnerable. But I feel like people are looking at it as if it's an event in a vacuum. Okay, Joshua suffered the first knockdown of his career against Klitschko. That's when he realised that he was vulnerable. But then if you look at how Joshua went on to finish the fight, where, yeah, he was losing on the scorecards and Klitschko was very much in control. Joshua managed to seize that victory with a decent stoppage of Klitschko. So I do think it was the Ruiz loss, the first one, that really dented his confidence. And then, of course, it's kind of been compacted by the Usyk fights. But anyway, talking about the setup, the training setup and the environment, because Robert Garcia says Joshua needs to be in an environment where he's setting an example to younger fighters and therefore is probably held a bit more accountable because he's setting that example. He's a bit more of a role model to younger up-and-coming fighters. But he also needs to leave his comfort zone and not be the boss. And I feel like this is an interesting point because we can see both of these things, or at least one of these things, in where Joshua used to train, his old setup at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield, basically the Olympic and international training centre for England, or the UK. And so if we look at Joshua's setup before, he was very much in that situation where the younger fighters, the amateurs, were looking up to him. They were going to World Championships, Commonwealth Games, the Olympics, the likes of Lawrence Okolie, Joshua Buatsi, Joe Joyce, Fraser Clark, all these people, all these names, they were looking up to Joshua. So that was present. But then if you look at Joshua in that environment, it did seem to be very much a comfort zone because he had, it seemed, at least from the outside looking in, he had things very much his own way. And now I was never present when Joshua was at the EIS, but then we did hear that notorious story from Tyan Booth. So Tyan Booth, take it with a pinch of salt, where he was talking about Joshua approached him after Tyan Booth had been talking smack as he does in one of his videos, and Joshua said, you know, GTFO, my gym, you know, get thee out of my gym. So even though Joshua is probably not, I'm not sure if he's logistically in control of the gym and decides the direction he's going in, he's the $1 million man. He was the unified heavyweight champion of the world, earning stupid money for his fights. And he's training in this amateur setup, indirectly or directly, whichever way you want to look at it. He's going to be the man. He's going to be the boss because everyone's in a roundabout way kind of eating off of his success. Even if they're not receiving money from him or funding or whatever, those amateurs, they're going to be present when all the television networks turn up to watch Joshua do his training in the lead up to a fight. So everyone was kind of benefiting from that. So Joshua kind of directly, indirectly, he was the boss, probably calling the shots, probably deciding everything was catered around him. And now there are pluses and minuses to that. You know, I work with a fair number of athletes in my current position, and you have to really strike a balance between getting feedback from the athlete and allowing some wiggle room for the athlete to give you their experience when they're training, because you have to remember athletes are not machines. They are operating at very high levels of athleticism and physical performance and mental performance. But small disruptions, small perturbations can really knock them off course. That's why the environment has to be so controlled. However, there's a degree of auto-regulation when you consult with an athlete and you get an insight into what they're going through, what their internal load is in terms of, okay, you prescribe them workload, and regardless of whether that workload is light intensity, medium intensity, high intensity, the athlete may not always process it in the same way. So medium intensity work prescriptions for an athlete who's fatigued will be internalized as a high workload that they struggle to get done. I'm trying to not be too convoluted, but there is a degree of leniency you need when you're training athletes, regardless of the sport, especially when at the highest level. But that can spill over to the point where the athlete is just in full control of the training. They call every single shot there is to call, and they may end up not pushing themselves. I've come across athletes like that before where, you know, they never get enough sleep. They've never had enough to eat. They're dehydrated. They're stressed because of X, Y, Z. but they never just think, you know what, this isn't the best situation, but I've got a competition to prepare for. I've got a fight. I've got a game, a match, whatever. I need to just knuckle down. That can be lost. And so you have athletes that are underprepared and maybe lack that mental edge of, I don't know if you guys train a lot. I'm guessing you do. We're all young men here. We're looking to stay in the best possible shape. Sometimes you just don't want to train. You don't want to go to the gym. You don't want to lift heavy. You'd rather just sit on the sofa, listen to some outmatch boxing, and just mong out to some boxing media. I understand it, but when you peel yourself off of the sofa, you tell yourself, you know what, I'm not in the best condition right now, but I'm going to do some training anyway. The feeling of confidence that gives you, of resilience, like you've just gone against your own will essentially, because your mind is telling you otherwise. Your body's tired and whatnot, but you're like, you know what, I have to get it done anyway. That fills you with a different kind of confidence because you're showing yourself, you're reaffirming, I'm a disciplined person. I'm a disciplined person in the sense of I'm going to do something that I don't want to do. I'm just going to power through because it has to be done. And maybe that's what Joshua's lacking. Maybe the defeats to Ruiz and Usyk are obviously damaging enough, but maybe Joshua hasn't been pushing his limits. Maybe his environment has been a bit soft. And I know this is something that Hatman has touched on specifically as well, because I was asking the question about is Roy Jones going to be the best fit for Joshua in terms of training, because I'm not sure how much Roy Jones can teach Joshua from a technical and tactical perspective that's going to benefit him that much in this moment in time, this part of Joshua's career. However, Roy Jones Jr. has a character and a personality that can be, it's very positive, very upbeat, very energetic, very positive energy. And that can be quite contagious. And also the confidence of Roy Jones. He has the swagger of the fighter he used to be when he was pound for pound number one, the most dynamic, athletic fighter, untouchable in his day. Roy Jones still has quite a bit of that, even though he's an older man. So I was wondering, okay, it's pluses and minuses. But then if we look at the environment that Roy Jones is going to provide for Joshua, would that be beneficial? Because who does Roy Jones train? The only name I can think of is Chris Eubank Jr., who Joshua's also quite familiar with. Maybe they'd end up being good training partners, pushing each other, because Eubank Jr. is quite an intense athlete. Maybe that's what Joshua needs. Or maybe would a Derek James, who Joshua's been pictured with recently, does he have the right environment where Joshua's going to be alongside at least one of the Charlos, Errol Spence? And Errol Spence hasn't been that complimentary of Joshua over the years. If you can find this video where Errol Spence was quite candid in the fact that he thought that Joshua has a glass jaw and that Ruiz would beat him in the rematch. So this is clearly someone who doesn't put Joshua on a pedestal. Not that he should. I'm not saying that, he should be reprimanded for not kissing Joshua's backside. I'm not saying that, but it'd be a different environment for Joshua where he's got a new trainer. Derek James does seem to be a bit, not a drill sergeant, but he seems like a no-nonsense kind of guy. And on top of that, Joshua will be surrounded by guys who see him as just another fighter. Yeah, you may be the former unified heavyweight champion of the world, but Jamel Charlo's undisputed champion in his weight class. Errol Spence is unified champion and seen as, some people have him the best welterweight in the world. These guys are intense characters. They're serious operators. And maybe just the toughness of an American gym would be what Joshua needs to get battle hardened. But on the flip side, what if this is too intense, too much intensity too early, and Joshua is just broken? Who knows? I'm just asking the question. I think this video's going on a bit, so I'm rambling. But I think it's interesting that Robert Garcia is saying these things because he's had first-hand experience working with AJ. He's not speculating right now. He's more informed than most people on what AJ probably needs. So I think interesting points. Check out the interview by ES News, Eli Sekbak. Check out the video by Alba Boxing. I'll leave them both linked in the description box. And let me know what you think of this. What do you think Anthony Joshua needs? Do you think he needs new trainer, new environment? Just a new trainer, same environment? Or same trainer, new environment? I don't know. Maybe I just repeated myself there. I'm a little bit tired, a little bit ill. But yeah, whatever you think, leave it in the comment section below. I'll get back to you. And for now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.